A horned creature stood on a cliff and noticed how the castle of the demon lord named Ranu was burning. Assuming the demon lord was dead, the horned creature celebrated his newly gained freedom. He decided to feel the wonderful freedom and smash everything on his way. He called himself Albert. Despite being a gargoyle, he had a human-like name befitting a prince. However, he wanted to complain to the person who created him. Though that creator already kicked the bucket, he was killed by the demon lord Ranu. Only 1 year after Albert came into existence, he had been captured and treated as nothing more than a reward taken after the war. The Demon King had used powerful magic to erase his will completely and turned him into a puppet using enslavement magic. Those trapped by this magic were treated as tools and were never expected to live very long as disposable tool pawns in battle. Still, he believed it was nothing but luck that allowed him to survive longer than the Demon King who had enslaved him. For a short moment he recalled those times when he barely survived the battlefield. He thought about revenge, but that feeling quickly faded since his tormentor was already gone. Instead, Albert focused on what he had wanted for a long time. He wanted freedom. His thoughts filled with bright images of a quiet and carefree life. Eating, going on a date, and enjoying the beach. He didn't care if he didn't have the money, power, or honor. His life as a gargoyle was finally beginning. He could now live freely as he could. Before he left for real, he took one last look behind him and saw smoke still rising far away from his former prison. He clasped his hands together and wished the others a good job in cleaning up after the war. Albert cheerfully skipped through the forest and wondered what he should do next when he heard voices nearby. He noticed other gargoyles talking about choosing the safest option for their group. He assumed they were the young gargoyles who escaped first. He wanted to talk to them and ask where they planned to go, but he hesitated to step out. He reminded himself to act strong since they were his juniors. At the same time, he worried that acting too much like a senior might make them cautious. He chose to be friendly but not overly casual. Albert stepped forward and called out to the younger gargoyles, asking what they were discussing. He stuttered as he spoke, and the group fell silent. Albert realized he had not spoken to anyone for the past 1500 years. The younger gargoyles stared at him without a word, and their gazes shocked him. After a moment, one of them explained they were planning to go together to the city of Farah. Albert remembered it was the closest city to the south. The young gargoyle continued, explaining that flying over the mountain range would be easy for them. Albert recalled that wyverns lived near the mountain peak. He then understood they planned to travel as a group to lower the danger so they could escape or fight if needed. Albert felt that traveling with more companions was always better, and the younger gargoyle agreed. For now, Albert decided to follow their plan. Soon, one of the gargoyles said it was time to leave. Albert agreed and checked if everyone was ready. The gargoyles spread their wings and took off one by one. Albert felt he had waited a long time for this moment, the chance to have companions of his own kind. He believed his journey was only beginning. Suddenly, a younger gargoyle told him to let go of his leg. Albert released it and felt confused. The gargoyle flew away and left him behind. Albert asked what that meant and wondered if they were leaving him. He felt hurt by what happened. The other gargoyles began talking among themselves, confused about what Albert was saying. One of them remarked that they did not need space for useless weight. Albert lost control and threw a tantrum. He questioned what he had done wrong and believed they should work together as the same kind. No one answered him. He shouted again, demanding a response. At last, one gargoyle pointed out the truth. Albert had no wings like them. Albert froze in place, unable to react. The gargoyles then took off without him. Albert could not fly. His plan to follow them failed, and he could not match their excitement or movement. He stood there in silence and watched his kind leave him behind. As they disappeared into the distance, he was left alone. He wondered what he should do next. In the final battle between the two demon lords Ranu and Beria, Albert stood on the front lines. During the fight, both of his wings were burned away. They were completely gone. He felt a quiet sense of thanks toward his wings for all the years they had carried him, but now they no longer existed. The one who destroyed his wings was Demon Lord Beria, one of the strongest among the 12 demon lords. If the enemy had been anyone else, his wings would have already grown back through his natural healing power. However, Beria's power had ruined them beyond recovery. Even so, Albert forced himself to think in a positive way. He had fought a demon lord and survived. Aside from his wings, the rest of his body remained intact. When he looked at it that way, he could still call himself lucky. Because of this, his situation did not seem as terrible as it first appeared, even though he now felt like damaged goods. Albert was actually the oldest and most experienced among the gargoyles. The others he had seen earlier were younger ones who had been created much later and did not truly know him. Long ago, he had even fought ancient dragons, creatures known as the strongest species in existence. Even if all those younger gargoyles had attacked him together, they would not have been able to leave a single mark on him. Some dragons were just as powerful as demon lords. Albert often wondered how he had managed to survive battles against such terrifying beings. The younger gargoyles did treat him with respect as a senior, but they lacked care and understanding. In the end, they left him behind. Still, Albert believed that the future mattered more than the past. From that moment on, he knew he had to focus on what lay ahead and prepare for what was coming next. At that time, his top priority was food. It would have been a joke if he died from hunger right after gaining his freedom. While he was enslaved, the demon lord supplied him with energy, so he never felt hungry. That was no longer the case. From then on, he needed real food to survive. He sat down and thought carefully about how to get something to eat. The first option was hunting monsters in the nearby forest. Some of those monsters were poisonous, but they could be eaten if prepared the right way. As he thought about this, he felt a sense of nostalgia. Long ago, he used to eat together with his creator. His creator taught him many things, such as language, alchemy, and magic, all to help with his work. However, he was never taught how to cook. Eating raw meat took courage, but he did not have much of a choice. He had some resistance to poison, and if his goal was only to fill his stomach, he believed he could manage somehow. The second option was to eat at a restaurant in the city. This would allow him to have proper meals even if he could not cook. The problem was that he had no money. He would need to find work first. If he could cross the mountain range without trouble, this would have been the best option. Sadly, he had been abandoned by his juniors, which made travel much harder. The last option was to steal food from the army of the demon lord Beria. It would require force, but it was not impossible. Still, Beria had seen his face clearly the last time they met. He did not know what would happen if he was caught. In his current state, fighting would only bring danger. He also thought about asking for work in her army. Beria was known as a demon lord who did not kill without reason. She believed in using anything that was useful. Even so, he doubted she would forgive him. He had caused serious trouble at the defense line before. He once grabbed Beria by the hair and slammed her into the ground without mercy. He even stabbed her with a stake and, to make things worse, spat strange goo on her face. When he remembered all of this, Albert felt ashamed of himself. He thought his actions had been terrible. Still, he hoped that she understood he had been under enslavement magic at the time. He wanted to apologize to her in some way if he ever got the chance. Suddenly, he noticed a strand of hair caught on his claws. He realized it belonged to Beria and thought about casting a preservation spell on it. However, doing that would make him look strange and improper. Still, Beria was a vampire progenitor, and her hair could serve as a strong magical medium. He wondered if she would ever forgive him. He had not killed anyone, and Beria's stomach should have healed quickly because of her regeneration, leaving no scars behind. Even so, the mud he had spat on her face was a different matter. That was not how anyone should treat a woman. He questioned whether it was right to greet her at all. He imagined making an excuse and calling her beautiful. But that might sound like a challenge instead. He also thought about kneeling and asking for forgiveness. Yet that would mean nothing unless she accepted it. At that moment, he realized how powerless he truly was. Because of this, Albert settled on a new plan. He would head toward Farah City and hunt monsters along the way for food. Once there, he would look for work and eat proper meals. He planned to save money and think about his future. He believed he could speak with someone in the city. He was not truly lonely, but he did not want to live alone in the mountains forever. The walk to Farah City would take 5 days. Even if he failed to find food, he could survive that long as he had water. He could use water magic to stay hydrated. If an emergency happened, he could strengthen his body with magic and run at full speed, reaching the city in less than a day. However, that would draw too much attention. With the decision made, it was time to head to the city. As Albert traveled through the woods, he thought about how calm everything felt since he had not met a single monster along the way. Still, thinking ahead, he wanted to hunt at least one monster for food. He began calling out, hoping to draw one out. Suddenly, a sharp scream echoed nearby. He thought it sounded like a woman. He then realized a monster was nearby, attacking a woman. A while ago, Albert moved through the woods with light steps. He felt eager, yet no monsters appeared at all. He believed he should have been attacked by now since he had grown weaker without his large wings. That thought made him feel low. At the same time, the view around him stayed the same for too long, and the walk slowly became boring. As he kept moving, he noticed something else. His legs were short and his steps were painfully small. Each stride felt awkward and slow. The mountain range was still far away, and he could not see it yet. It became clear that the journey would take much longer than he first thought. While walking forward, he suddenly stepped on something sharp. Pain shot through his foot, and he cried out. Broken branches and small stones dug into his soles. If he could still fly, none of this would have happened. He wished he had shoes to protect his feet. He promised himself that once he reached town, he would earn money and buy a pair. He also planned to make them waterproof. After that, he imagined eating until he was full at the best restaurant he could find. It was late in the evening of the second day when Albert finally saw the mountain range ahead. His earlier guess had been far from correct. He lacked experience traveling on foot, and it showed. His stomach was now rumbling loudly. He felt so hungry that he thought he might start eating the dirt beneath his feet. That idea almost made sense since he was a gargoyle and his body was made of minerals. Still, he forced himself to stop thinking that way. He realized that hunger was clouding his thoughts. He had built resistance to many kinds of magic, but hunger was new to him. This explained why his body felt weak. Even so, not a single monster appeared. He wondered why the forest stayed so quiet. He assumed that Ranu's death had changed something deep within the woods. Even then, he hoped monsters would show up soon. He believed that after one more prayer, he would finally meet one. Suddenly, he heard a scream. He thought a monster was close. When he noticed the scream sounded like it came from a woman, he assumed the heroine had appeared. Soon after, he found a dwarf female nearby. He then questioned who had screamed and wondered if his hearing had already failed. The one who needed saving was clearly a goblin. It was male and still young, and its voice had not changed yet. So Albert realized he had mistaken it for a woman. Even so, he had found the monster he was looking for. Even if it was not a heroine, he still chose to help. At that moment, the wyvern moved in to kill and planned to take the goblin as its meal. The attack was stopped by a water membrane that formed a barrier. He shielded the goblin from harm. He warned the goblin to stay inside the water membrane if he wanted to survive. He felt relieved when he saw the goblin was not injured. The goblin looked at him with confusion and tried to learn who he was. Albert was about to introduce himself, but the wyvern cut the moment short. He could clearly see how angry it had become. Under normal conditions, he would have let it escape, but he needed food. The wyvern suddenly flew in wide circles with its tongue hanging out, acting as if it was mocking him. This angered Albert, and he believed the creature was showing off its wings. He could not accept that a lesser dragon dared to mock him. He also thought it was trying to show its advantage in the air against someone fighting on the ground. This pushed his anger even further, and he prepared to end the fight. He planned to finish it without ruining the meat. He knew the wyvern reacted fast, but in close combat he held the advantage. In a single moment he moved forward and cut the wyvern's neck with his claws. The goblin stared in shock. Albert felt the fight had ended too easily, leaving him unsatisfied. He still felt the need to respect the fallen creature and promised its death would not be wasted. Soon after, he took out his eating tools, knowing it was time for his long-awaited meal. He thought about how to eat it since he lacked cooking skills. Boiling or grilling were options, but he could not use fire magic. His stomach growled loudly, demanding food. With no other choice, he decided to eat it raw, just as he had planned before. He believed the belly would be the softest part and took a moment to examine it. It did not look appealing, but hunger left him with no other option. Just as Albert was about to take a bite, the goblin stopped him and asked him to wait. He said that Albert could not eat the wyvern like that. Albert had completely forgotten about the goblin and wondered what his problem was. He told him not to interfere with someone else's meal. He even thought the goblin wanted to become the meal instead. The goblin quickly denied this and begged to be spared from being eaten. He explained that the poison had to be removed from the wyvern's meat before it could be eaten. He said that a wyvern's organs contained poison and all of it needed to be taken out. After that, the meat had to be dried under the sun for a week before it became safe to eat. This was the first time Albert had ever heard of such a thing. He could not believe he had to wait an entire week. Albert felt shocked but thanked the goblin for warning him. The goblin said that he should be the one giving thanks instead. He then introduced himself as Didarian, and the slime beside him was named Bomb. They thanked Albert for saving them from danger. Albert felt surprised by how polite the young goblin was and introduced himself in return. Still, Didarian felt amazed that Albert had defeated the wyvern since it was supposed to be the strongest monster in the area. Albert proudly said that he had lived for 1,500 years, and his battle experience was very real. Didarian found this hard to believe. Albert had expected that reaction. It really did sound like a lie when he said it, so he decided not to push the matter further. Curious, Didarian asked what Albert planned to do with the wyvern now. Albert could have eaten it without any problem because of his resistance to poison. However, after hearing the warning, he no longer felt like eating it right away. Still, he needed food. Albert asked again if the meat truly contained poison and if it really took a full week to remove it and make it safe. Didarian confirmed that this was true. Albert then decided to endure the hunger and eat it later. Didarian felt shocked and said Albert would die before that happened. Albert looked disappointed and said there was nothing he could do about it. He believed he would starve to death if he waited that long. Just then, Didarian offered to dissect the wyvern. Albert refused because he could not wait for a whole week. Didarian then grabbed Bomb and explained that they had a slime that could break down the toxin and remove the poison in only a few hours. Albert felt shocked and became angry. He asked why Didarian did not say that earlier. Didarian apologized and explained that Bomb was actually very weak. He said they had only recently been freed from Demon Lord Ranu's control magic. There were no rivers nearby, and it was hard to get water. If this continued, Bomb might dry out. Slimes were made of 99% water. They held water around a clear core inside their bodies and used it as energy to live and move. Didarian explained that slimes that could not refill their water would not survive for long. He then looked like he was asking for help. Albert understood right away that they needed his water magic to restore the slime. Didarian apologized again for asking something so shameless after Albert had already saved them. Albert sighed. He said he did not mind if that was the cost of getting a proper meal. Didarian felt happy and thanked him again and again. He was clearly relieved about Bomb's condition. Still, Albert felt surprised that a goblin with no fighting ability and a slime had managed to come this far. Didarian took out a knife from his backpack and said he would start dissecting the wyvern at once. Albert told him to go ahead. As for himself, he decided to reward the slime for surviving this long journey. He even patted its head. He felt relieved because he could finally eat. In a generous mood, he chose to give them special treatment using high-quality water. He cast a level 7 water spell called Great Tsunami. The slime reacted in shock and its loud squeals echoed across the area. Didarian stayed fully focused on his task and did not notice anything happening behind him. After some time passed, Albert checked on the slime and asked how it was feeling. Bomb responded with cheerful squeals. Albert felt glad that it seemed healthy again. The slime somehow made him feel calm, much like a small pet. Soon after, Didarian announced that he had finished dissecting the wyvern. Albert praised him for his good work and said he had also finished rehydrating the slime. Didarian thanked him, but his expression quickly changed when he looked up and saw Bomb standing far taller than before. Albert scolded him for speaking that way to a friend. Didarian apologized for the sudden outburst, but it was not something he truly needed to apologize for. He then asked why Bomb had grown so large. The slime was now even taller than Albert. Albert explained that he had only given Bomb some high-quality water. Didarian felt relieved once he knew Bomb was healthy and fine. After that, he asked Bomb to detoxify the meat for them. Albert and Didarian watched as Bomb covered the wyvern's carcass with its slime body and slowly dissolved the toxins inside it. While watching Bomb work, Albert felt an odd sense of pride for no clear reason. After 30 minutes, Bomb spat out the wyvern's carcass. Didarian thought the detoxification was complete, but he was surprised by how fast it happened. He believed the process usually took over 2 hours. The only explanation he could think of was that Bomb was in excellent condition after recovering. Albert then realized that the two were communicating through telepathy. Both reacted at once, and Didarian confirmed it. Albert dropped to the ground feeling frustrated because he wanted to learn telepathy as well. Didarian explained that telepathy allowed them to live peacefully with other demon races. Even so, he believed Albert's ability to use magic was already impressive and good enough. Albert agreed that this was probably true. Demon races had natural abilities that were part of their bodies. Telepathy was one of these abilities. It allowed them to communicate with creatures that did not have a language. This ability was useful, but it was mostly found in lower-ranked and weaker species. On the other hand, species above a certain rank could use magic. Their natural abilities focused more on attack and combat. They rarely had convenient skills like telepathy. Albert realized that no one could have everything. Strength often came at the cost of convenience. Albert later felt thankful for everything Didarian had done. Didarian believed the thanks should have gone to Albert instead. After that, Didarian picked up his backpack and prepared to leave. Albert felt confused and asked him to stop. He wondered why Didarian would not eat with him. Didarian felt surprised and asked if that was truly fine. Albert thought that eating together had always been the plan. He also doubted that Didarian even had food with him. Didarian admitted he had none, but believed they could find edible plants if they walked for half a day. Albert then stood up and told him to eat together. He explained that there was plenty of food and that eating alone would feel too lonely. He believed Didarian had saved him from food poisoning, and that reason alone was enough to share his food. Didarian felt deeply moved and accepted the offer with gratitude. Albert encouraged him to eat freely, and the two of them sat down to eat. Didarian was shocked when he noticed the meat. He wondered if it would be eaten as it was. Albert questioned if that was a problem. Didarian knew it was not safe to eat raw meat, but since it was wyvern meat, cooking it would be much better. Albert admitted that he could not use fire magic. Didarian then showed his backpack and told him not to worry. He took out a special item that could create fire. It looked like a simple stone that Didarian had picked up earlier, thinking it might be useful. Albert finally understood how impressive Didarian truly was. His survival skills were extremely high. Albert then questioned whether Didarian was exceptional or if he himself was simply lacking. Using the firestone, Didarian started a fire from a pile of dry leaves. Albert took the meat steaks and chose to grill them himself. He felt sorry for leaving the work to them earlier. Didarian believed it was fine because chances to eat wyvern meat were very rare. All of a sudden, Didarian released the firewood and stared in shock. Albert became worried and wondered what had happened. Didarian questioned if Albert was truly alright. Albert was holding the meat and grilling it directly over the fire with his bare hands. At that moment, Albert understood the problem. What he was doing was careless. Even though his body resisted fire, the heat did not bother him. Still, the melted fat on his hands felt unpleasant. He felt embarrassed and handed the task to Didarian instead. Didarian looked surprised but accepted the job without complaint. Albert apologized once again. Not long after, Didarian announced that the food was finished. Albert felt excited as he looked at the meat skewered on sticks and cooked over the fire. Didarian thought it would have tasted better with salt, but Albert felt it already looked very good. After getting permission, Albert picked up a stick and took a large bite. Juice spilled out as he chewed, and his body reacted without control. He closed his eyes and focused on the taste spreading through his mouth. Each bite released more flavor and warmth. This was what eating truly meant. This was the feeling of filling an empty stomach. It was his first proper meal in 1,500 years. The meat was simple, only grilled pieces without any seasoning, yet to Albert it felt like the greatest feast. Tears slowly formed as the joy overwhelmed him. Daidarian became concerned, wondering if something was wrong. Albert quickly assured him that the food was very good. Even if the words sounded common, they were the only ones that fit his feelings. Albert then created water using his magic and offered it to Daidarian. Daidarian drank it and found the water refreshing. Hearing that made Albert feel relieved and happy. After the meal ended, Albert lay on the ground with a full stomach. He felt calm and satisfied. He then asked what the others planned to do next. Daidarian was surprised by the question but soon explained their situation. They planned to return to their homeland in the western forest, which was about half a day away. Their village had been burned down 3 months earlier by Ranu's followers. They never expected a small tribal settlement to be attacked, and the sudden strike caught them unprepared. They managed to help the women and children escape, but many of the men were either killed or taken away. Daidarian himself had been captured during that attack and placed under enslavement magic. Daidarian truly wanted to return to his homeland, and at least build graves for everyone who had died. Albert knew that this kind of act was rare in those times, but the thought still felt heavy in his heart. Since the demon lord Ranu was already dead, Daidarian believed that someone might return to the village one day. Albert wondered if Baum was also going with them. The slime confirmed that he was going as well. Daidarian felt happy to hear this and thanked him. Albert still could not fully understand the slime's way of thinking. Daidarian then asked where Albert planned to go next. Albert said he was thinking about heading to Farah. After that, he planned to travel wherever he felt like going. Daidarian asked if Albert planned to cross the mountain range. He then decided to ask about something that had been on his mind. He asked what had happened to Albert's wings. Albert explained that his wings had been burned away during the battle to defend the castle. Albert admitted that he felt frustrated about losing his wings. However, if it were not for Beria, he would not have gained his freedom. He understood why the younger gargoyles had abandoned him. It could not be helped. Even so, he worried about whether they were safe in the city. Albert's calm thinking came from his long life. He had lived and endured for 1,500 years, which taught him patience. He believed conflict only brought sadness, and anger would never truly end anything. Still, if he ever met those young gargoyles again, he planned to take his revenge. He never said that he would forgive them. Daidarian was left shaking with fear. Albert thought he had scared him because of the strange faces he made while talking to himself. Daidarian then apologized for being careless and believed that Albert had many things he could not speak about. Albert reassured him that his wings would grow back in time and pointed out that they were both dealing with similar problems. He told Daidarian not to worry about it. He also said they should not ruin the moment after the good meal they had just eaten, then gently patted Daidarian on the head. Albert stretched his body and said he was starting to feel sleepy. He suggested that they should rest soon. Daidarian agreed and offered to stay awake to keep watch while Albert slept. Albert refused and said there was no need for that. He then created a wide membrane made of water around them, covering the entire area. It worked as a defensive wall, and if it broke, he would know right away. To be safe, he added another layer made of magic. The young goblin became curious and asked if he could touch it. Albert said it was fine since it was only water. Daidarian was amazed and tested it by lightly bumping into it. Albert then warned him that while it might let him pass through from inside, it completely blocked anything from the outside. Daidarian stopped moving and felt guilty. Instead, he slowly placed his hands into the membrane and enjoyed the cool feeling of the water. Watching from behind, Albert noticed how much fun Daidarian was having. He could tell that Daidarian was still very young. He believed the goblin had not even lived for 10 years yet. When his companions were killed, Daidarian had already been placed under enslavement magic, yet he had not lost his kindness. Daidarian apologized for playing around, but Albert told him it was fine. He could see that the young goblin was a kind child. Daidarian had stopped him from eating poisonous wyvern meat when he could have kept quiet and let Albert die. Albert liked this honest and direct nature. Still, he felt that such an attitude could make life difficult in this harsh world. He then turned to the side and said he would sleep first. While still enjoying the water, Daidarian wished him a good night. As Albert closed his eyes, he thought that he did not want this child to die. Meanwhile, inside a castle filled with fire and smoke, Demon Lord Beria kept rubbing her face with a towel. A servant soon reported that the applicants for their army had already gathered in the audience chamber. Still wiping her face, Beria replied that she would arrive shortly and told them to wait. After the servant left, she quietly cursed a certain gargoyle. Monsters, demon races, and creatures tied to evil had a nature that made them grow stronger each time they fought. After many brutal battles, 12 powerful beings came to be known as demon lords. Among them, the ones with outstanding power were called the Immortal Four. Beria was one of them. She was the first ancestor of vampires. 3 years earlier, she had received a report about a reckless fool who had started a war within her territory. Her servant confirmed that it was the demon lord Ranu. Beria remembered Ranu's rough and proud face and wondered if he was a werewolf or a Fenrir. Even so, she could not understand why someone would desire war so strongly. Her head had ached at the time. She had already been overwhelmed with work and her land was so wide that ruling it alone was difficult. Seeing her condition, her servant looked concerned and suggested forcing Ranu to swear loyalty and bringing him into their faction. Beria felt relieved by this idea since it would end the fighting. Because she already held alliances with other demon lords, she believed the same could be done with Ranu. The servant later confirmed that a request had been sent with this goal. A reply arrived almost at once, showing Ranu's deep hostility toward Beria. He declared that the seat of the Immortal Four belonged to him. Beria could not believe such foolish people existed. With an enemy like this, war became unavoidable. There was no other choice but for Beria to crush this reckless dog. 3 years passed, and Ranu was finally pushed into a corner, with only his castle left. There was a clear difference between Beria and Ranu when it came to personal strength. Beria's army set up camp outside the castle gates. She ordered her troops to rest for the day, regain their strength and prepare to attack the castle the next morning. At that moment, something was seen flying toward them. Beria soon noticed a gargoyle moving through the air without care. It was Albert. However, his eyes showed that he was still under the effect of enslavement magic. She first thought he was sent as a scout, but his behavior seemed far too careless. One of the soldiers attacked with fire magic, and Albert exploded on the spot. Beria did not understand his purpose, but she felt that his death was a waste. Enslavement magic created soldiers who lacked emotion and followed orders without question. While such magic could be useful in war, Beria believed that living beings should choose whether they lived or died by their own will. She assumed the gargoyle had been destroyed completely. She also believed that deep down it had wanted to live freely by its own choice. After the smoke cleared, Albert came out without a single injury. Beria and her soldiers felt shocked. A gargoyle should not have resisted fire magic, and he did not seem to use any defensive barrier. Beria then noticed something strange. The gargoyle had covered his body in a thick flow of magical power. She realized that his power was stronger than hers. The magic kept rising without stopping. From this, she understood that the gargoyle was about to activate level 5 magic. She quickly understood how dangerous the situation had become. If he used a higher tier spell, half of her army would be wiped out in one attack. She moved at once to stop him at all costs. Her plan was to take away his movement first and deal with Ranu afterward. If Ranu died, the enslavement magic would break, and she would not need to face the gargoyle directly again. However, Albert sensed her approach. He grabbed her by the hair and slammed her into the ground. He spun her around and smashed her down again with force. After that, he spat mud onto her face, blocking her sight. While she was blinded, Albert stabbed her stomach with a stake. Beria resisted despite the pain. She cast a high-level fire spell and burned off his wings. She believed this would slow the gargoyle down for a short time. She then turned her attention to Ranu, who turned out to be far weaker than the gargoyle. She defeated him soon after. When the battle ended, a servant kept calling out to Beria, worried about her condition. She had made them wait while she tried to clean the mud from her face. She could hear whispers coming from outside the room. Before Ranu died, she questioned him about the gargoyle, but he did not seem to know anything. The gargoyle's strength matched even the Immortal Four. Later, her subordinates reported that the gargoyle had already moved south after they took control of Ranu's castle. Beria hoped Albert had regained his reason now that his free will had returned. If possible, she wanted him as her subordinate. She also hoped he did not hate her for burning his wings. A maid rushed in saying she had to assist her due to the lack of time and mentioned that 2 hours had already passed. Beria did not want anyone to see her while her face was still covered in mud. The maid entered anyway and froze when she saw her lord's face. She tried to understand what had happened, but Beria covered her face and collapsed to the ground in shame. The next day, Albert woke up feeling rested. Dadarian and Baum greeted him. Albert greeted them back and noticed that Dadarian looked tired. He asked if Dadarian could not sleep. Dadarian said he slept well, but he planned to gather some twigs for breakfast. When he was about to leave the barrier, he remembered that he could not get back inside. Albert apologized and removed the water membrane. Dadarian said it was fine since Albert had given them a safe place to stay. He then went to prepare breakfast. While he worked, Dadarian asked if Albert truly planned to cross the mountain range on foot. Albert confirmed it because he could not fly anymore. Dadarian then thought Albert was planning to fight monsters along the way. He asked if Albert could use detection magic. Albert said he could and that it could reach up to 100 meters at most. Dadarian felt shocked after hearing about such a wide range. Albert said it was tiring, so he did not use it often. Detection magic allowed a person to sense living beings and magical power within a certain area. However, if the range became too wide, the brain could not handle all the information. Because of this, Albert usually used only a 10-meter range. At that distance, enemies could already notice him. He kept the magic active just in case someone tried to attack him by surprise. He feared getting lost in the mountains more than fighting monsters. Dadarian laughed and served the finished breakfast. He then said Albert would not get lost in the Fara mountain range. While eating, Albert asked why. Dadarian explained that thunder dragons living on the mountain peaks glowed at night. They could not see them from where they were, but if Albert checked the direction at night, he would be fine. Albert said he did not know about that. He then asked if there was any chance of being attacked by those thunder dragons. Daedarian said he never heard of anyone being attacked and believed Albert would be safe as long as he stayed away from them. Albert felt relieved but became curious about why the dragons glowed at night. Daedarian said he only heard that the thunder dragons started glowing around 200 years ago. They had already lived on the peaks for a long time before that. Albert then thought that something must have caused the change in those dragons. After they finished their meal, Albert suggested that they should continue their journey, and thanked the young goblin for the food. Daedarian suddenly shouted as if he had remembered something important. Albert asked what was wrong. Daedarian quickly told him to take a bag. Albert wondered what it was for. Daedarian explained that he made it from the wyvern's leather because carrying the extra meat would be hard without it. He said it was a small gift to thank Albert for sharing the meat. Albert felt surprised by the young goblin's honest smile and kind words. After thinking for a moment, he made a decision. He became serious and told Daedarian that he planned to go to the goblin village first. This surprised Daedarian because he knew Albert was supposed to go to Forest City. Albert said that was still his goal, but now that he had more food, the trip was no longer urgent. He also felt that they had formed a bond, so traveling together for a while felt right to him. There was also something else that worried him. He remembered that the ones who attacked Daedarian's village were the werewolves. Daedarian flinched, which confirmed Albert's thoughts. Now that Ranu was dead, those werewolves would spread out, and Albert could only imagine what might happen when they became hungry. He was also uneasy because he had not sensed any monsters along the way. He asked if that was truly normal. Daedarian happily welcomed him and said that Baum would also be glad to have him with them. Albert smiled and hoped he could stay under their care once again. In the end, he went with the two of them to Daedarian's village. As they walked through the forest, Albert remembered how Daedarian had talked about edible plants. The young goblin confirmed that some fruits, grass, and seeds could be gathered and eaten. He promised to prepare plenty of good food once they arrived at the village. As their journey continued, Albert developed a corn on his foot. He struggled to keep up with the others while they walked. Baum noticed this and asked Daedarian to tell Albert to ride on top of him. Albert felt shocked and moved. He thanked the slime for being kind and thoughtful. Not long after, they reached the village. However, everything looked like ruins. Albert climbed down from the slime and smelled the air. He found it strange because there was no smell of decay. Daedarian believed that his comrades who returned earlier had already buried the dead. He then announced that the chief's son had returned and asked if anyone was nearby. No one answered. Soon a nearby door opened. Daedarian turned toward the house and showed a happy face. A female goblin was surprised to see that it was really Daedarian. The young goblin hugged her and felt glad to see her again. The female goblin named Mido almost cried. She thought she would never see him again after the werewolves took him away. Daedarian explained that he was able to return because Ranu had died. After that, an adult female goblin came out of the house. Daedarian felt glad to see her and was relieved that she was safe. Her name was Sally. Sally was also happy to see him, but she wondered who the others behind him were. Daedarian explained that they were friends he met on the journey, Baum the slime and Albert the gargoyle. Mido felt confused because Albert did not have wings and did not look like a gargoyle. She asked why he had come all the way to their village. Albert explained that he was worried about the lack of monsters in the forest. After hearing this, Daedarian realized that they had only met a single wyvern on the way. Albert believed this was because Demon Lord Beria's forces were moving forward and scaring the monsters away from the castle. Their chance of meeting monsters should have been much higher. Daedarian then understood why Albert had chosen to travel with them. Albert proudly said that they would be safe with him around. The young goblin felt glad to hear that. Mido thanked him for his help. She introduced herself properly as Mido the goblin. Her sister Sally introduced herself as a hobgoblin. Albert realized that Sally was an evolved type of goblin and then introduced himself as well. As they sat inside the house, Daedarian asked the girls what had happened after he was taken away. On the day of the attack by Ranu's subordinates, the male goblins fought against the werewolves to give everyone time to escape. The women and children who managed to flee were now hiding in the forest 5 kilometers to the west. Sally and Mido had been checking on the village from time to time. Daedarian felt relieved when he heard they escaped safely. He realized their fight had not been useless. He felt so thankful that he started crying. Mido then shared how they buried the dead male goblins a short distance to the north. Daedarian thanked her for doing that. Sally explained that she had already contacted everyone deep in the forest about Daedarian's return using telepathy. Albert felt surprised. He remembered that everyone was 5 kilometers away and asked if telepathy could really reach that far. Sally confirmed it was possible as long as she knew the exact location. Albert then understood that they escaped from the werewolves because of that power, and Sally confirmed it. Daedarian then asked what they planned to do next. Sally said she wanted to live in the village again now that Ranu was dead. However, there was still a problem. She said the werewolves who attacked already knew their location and might return. If that happened and without the male goblins, they would not be able to escape. At that moment, Albert raised his hand and said he could help stop the werewolves from entering the village. The goblins were shocked. Sally asked if he was sure. Albert suggested going outside for a moment. He then created a large water membrane around the area. Daedarian realized it was the same spell he had seen before. Albert said it should be enough to stop the werewolves from getting inside. Sally told him to wait. She said a water membrane was not strong enough to stop werewolves. Daedarian told her it would be fine since even a wyvern could not break Albert's water membrane. Sally was shocked and doubted that claim. She said the spell was not that powerful. Even her elf friend who was skilled in water magic said it would already be amazing if it could block a wyvern attack. She said she could break it easily and pulled out her spear. Daedarian tried to calm her down, but Albert stopped him and told Sally to do what she wanted. Sally felt insulted and said he should not look down on her. She spun her body and swung her spear at the water membrane. Her attack bounced off without leaving a mark. She stood there in confusion. She then used more spear techniques and attacked again and again. Albert started to feel nervous since some of her moves looked dangerous. In the end, Sally gave up. Daedarian said the water membrane was amazing because even Sally's spear could not pierce it. Sally agreed that it was powerful and walked back toward the village. Daedarian then asked Albert if it was the same barrier from before. Albert agreed and confirmed that no one could enter it from the outside. Sally touched the barrier and got electrocuted. She called it useless. Albert said that was why he explained it could stop the werewolves from entering, but it would also stop their allies from entering. Sally then realized that even Albert, the caster, could not enter or leave it. Albert replied that he could freely enter and exit. Sally asked why that was possible. Albert explained that it was because of the magic pattern. The goblins looked confused, so Albert began to explain. When someone used magic, they could change the magical power in their body into something with a special property like water or fire. This property could only become something they had an affinity for. For him, it was water, earth, and gravity. A magic pattern was a mix of these properties and a person's unique traits. Magic patterns were different for everyone, and no two were exactly the same. Magical power was needed for all magic, so the magic pattern was always part of it. If two people had the same magic pattern, they could ignore the effects of that magic. The goblins did not know what to say. Albert saw that they did not understand. He felt sorry for explaining for too long, so he made it simple. If someone had the same magic pattern as the caster who made the barrier, that person could freely enter and exit it. Daedarian somehow understood. Sally then wondered if Albert could give them his magic pattern. Albert pointed out how sharp Sally was and said that it was possible. However, he asked what would happen if he was gone. Sally then realized what would happen to those who would be born in the future without Albert there to pass on his magic pattern. Just then, Baum returned from his walk. Daedarian welcomed him back. At that moment, Baum noticed Albert and jumped on him. Albert told him to stop cuddling, but then he noticed something strange. Everyone wondered how Baum had entered the water barrier. Albert soon realized the reason. He had refilled Baum's water using his magic, and the slime's magic pattern had become the same as his. Daedarian remembered that it was the Great Tsunami. He explained that most of Baum's body was now made from it. If they attached a part of Baum's body to the goblins, they would be able to enter and leave the barrier even when Albert was not nearby. However, Daedarian felt worried about dividing Baum into very small parts. Baum then made a few sounds. Daedarian was surprised and asked if he could truly do it. He followed the slime's instruction and stepped outside the water barrier. After that, he went back inside, and it worked because of the piece of Baum. Even so, the young goblin still worried about separating Baum into many pieces. Baum confirmed that he could naturally grow back the lost parts, so it would not be a problem, and he would stay in the village. Albert was shocked to learn that a slime could heal itself. He realized how special Baum truly was. If Baum stayed in the village, then the problem with the barrier would be finally solved. Sally also entered the barrier and agreed with the plan. She said she would inform the others through telepathy. Now they could live in the village again. She thanked Albert for his help and said everyone would be happy to return. Albert smiled, feeling glad for them. As the night covered the sky, two girls traveled through the dark forest. Their destination was the Goblin village. The day after setting up the water membrane barrier, the goblins returned to the village. Albert felt glad to see everyone coming back safely. Sally said it was thanks to him. At that moment, someone called out to Daedarian. It was his mother. He ran to her and hugged her while crying. Watching them meet again made Albert feel happy for the young goblin boy. It was a warm reunion. He did not want to disturb the moment, so he decided to go outside to look for food. Riding on the slime, he invited it to search for food with him. While they searched around, Baum looked worried as Albert picked up random plants and berries. Albert asked what was wrong since the berries looked tasty. He took a bite and threw up right away. The taste was bad, but the berries were still edible. He decided to keep them as emergency food. Now that the village problem was solved, he planned to head to Farah City soon. When he reached the city, he wanted to get close to some girls. He already imagined a fun life surrounded by them. Suddenly, he sensed something strange. Baum also made a few sounds. Albert thought he received a message through telepathy. He believed that someone unknown had touched the barrier. The slime kept making sounds, but Albert could not understand it. He then told the slime to act freely. Baum let Albert ride on his back and rushed toward the village at high speed. In just a moment they arrived. Outside the barrier, a girl kept kicking the water membrane. Sally and Didarian tried to calm her down and asked her to wait for a while. They even offered her a glass of water. A dryad girl standing behind her also asked her to relax. The elf girl insisted she was calm. The dryad girl reminded her that they needed to wait for someone named Albert. Even so, the elf girl continued kicking the barrier and refused to listen. Hiding behind a tree, Albert wondered what was going on. He saw both a dryad girl and an elf girl. When he thought about meeting girls, this was not what he imagined. Elves and dryads were races known for their beauty. The elf girl had long golden hair and a full chest. However, her behavior did not match her looks at all. It ruined the mood. The dryad had a curvy body that could easily charm men. Still, Albert could not focus on her appearance because the elf girl was too noisy. Just then, Didarian noticed Albert and welcomed him back. The elf girl turned her focus toward him. Albert had no choice but to step out. He said he had returned after hearing the noise from far away. The elf girl shouted at him and said the village was a goblin settlement. She angrily asked why a gargoyle was there. Albert tried to calm her down. The elf girl said she had come to check on her friend's village to see how the repair was going, but she could not get inside. She angrily asked what Albert was thinking when he made such a strong barrier. Still, she felt amazed because she had never seen a barrier with such power before. Albert felt confused and asked if she was not angry. He could not tell if she was hostile or friendly. Didarian then said that the elf girl named Risa could be impulsive but was kind at heart. Albert wondered if it was safe to let her enter. She was already telling him to hurry up. Since she did not seem like a bad person, Albert gave her his magic pattern. The elf girl did not even thank him and walked straight through the barrier. The dryad girl kept apologizing to Albert. Later, inside a house, Sally asked why the two of them had come to the goblin settlement. Mia, the dryad, said they had a request for the goblins. Sally felt shocked after hearing that. Mia then reminded them that dryads could hear the voices of trees and sense danger in the forest early. First, she explained the current state of the forest. Because of the war between two demon lords nearby, forest monsters had moved deeper into the woods, away from the castle. Those monsters later returned to their old homes, but stronger monsters that hunted them had followed. These new monsters had already reached near the dryads' homes and the goblin settlement as well. Didarian found this news terrible and looked at Albert with worry. Albert felt confused at first but said his barrier could not be broken by such creatures. Mia agreed that the barrier was strong, so strong that she and her friend could not enter it. She said dryads had ways to protect themselves but no way to fight back. If things continued like this, their settlement would one day be destroyed. For that reason, she and her people wanted to form an official alliance with the goblins. The goblins looked worried. Sally apologized and said they could not handle such monsters on their own. Mia then said they could manage the problem with her people's special skill, enchantment magic. This kind of magic could place power and elements into weapons and armor, making them stronger and more useful in battle. Sally then thought that Mia wanted the goblins to fight using those enchanted weapons. Mia confirmed this and apologized. Even if her people could make strong weapons, they did not have the physical strength to use them well. She asked the goblins to freely use the weapons for their normal hunting as well. She also said that if they allowed her to stay in the village, she could watch over the forest using her dryad abilities. She then asked what they thought about her idea. After thinking for a while, Sally smiled. She said she understood and would talk about it with everyone in the village. For now, she suggested that Mia stay for the night. Mia thanked her with sincere feelings. Just then, Risa the elf said she had brought many supplies after hearing that the goblins were rebuilding their settlement. Albert was surprised by how much she had carried. Didarian asked if it was really fine for them to accept all those items. Risa assured him that it was fine because they helped each other during hard times. Albert understood her honest feelings and realized that she was truly kind. Suddenly, Risa called out to Albert and invited him to go outside for a talk. Even though a beautiful girl had invited him, Albert did not feel happy for some reason. As they reached the edge of the settlement, Risa properly introduced herself. Albert also proudly introduced himself as the strongest of his kind. Risa wondered if that was true. She could clearly see that Albert was a gargoyle, but she asked what he really was. Albert assured her that he was a gargoyle, but with a few missing parts. Risa carefully scanned him and asked if that was true. Because of the strength of the barrier, she could not accept anything less than Demon Lord level magic power. Albert claimed that he was not lying. Since she asked him that question, he also asked if she was really an elf. He knew she was hiding her magic power. He said he would not pry into it, but Risa casually mentioned that she was actually a high elf. Albert was shocked. Risa explained that she only hid her magic power to avoid scaring others. Still, this was Albert's first time seeing a high elf. Risa confirmed that there were not many of them. High elves were a higher race of elves and were known to be powerful beings who could master many types of magic, such as fire, water, earth, wind, and more. Risa warned him not to pry into her personal matters just because she was rare. Albert said he understood. Still, he was curious about how many high elves existed since she said there were only a few. Risa confirmed that there were 5 of them. One was a demon lord, 3 were subordinates of that demon lord, and the last one was the only girl and the demon lord's sister. When Albert heard this, he realized something important. Riza was someone dangerous. He could not believe she shared such serious information so easily. If he pointed it out, he might lose his life. For now, he asked why a high elf like her was in a place like this. Riza simply replied that she was traveling and hated being bored. She was in the middle of a journey around the world. This time she happened to be nearby and decided to visit a friend. Albert wondered what this elf girl had in common with the other girls. Riza then shared how she once got lost in the woods and how Mia and Sally helped her. Albert could not believe that a high elf got lost in a forest, and he tried hard to hold back his laughter. Riza blushed and told him that it was already in the past. She said she was not used to traveling back then and had stayed inside her country for most of her life. Albert became curious about her homeland but did not bring it up. Riza then said that it was enough about her and that it was now Albert's turn to talk about himself. Riza learned what had happened, especially the part about Demon Lord Beria taking Albert's wings. She felt that he was not lying, but she still found it hard to believe. Albert then realized that he had proof. Riza became excited, but her hope faded when she saw that it was only a strand of another woman's hair. She could not believe Albert would give her something that belonged to another woman. However, she soon understood as she connected it to Albert's story. Albert confirmed that the hair belonged to the vampire progenitor. It was known as a top-class magic medium. Reese found this hard to believe and asked why he even had such a thing. Albert once again said that he had fought on the front lines. Reese told him to stop making obvious lies and assumed that the strong barrier had been created using the hair. Albert said he made the barrier on his own. Even so, Risa could not accept something so valuable without giving something in return. She asked if he truly understood its worth. Albert said that he did, but he was still willing to give it to her. He only hoped that she would help him if he got into trouble in the future. Risa was surprised. She decided to accept the hair and promised to help him when she could. Albert said he would only ask for things she was able to do. Risa felt uneasy about his words and thought he might be planning to ask for something improper. Albert teased her and said she was the one with improper thoughts. Risa became angry but also felt relieved. At first she had been cautious of a suspicious gargoyle who could create such a strong barrier. Albert asked why she felt that way. She said only a fool would use a high-level magic item so easily for others. Still, she did not dislike that part of him. Her smile made Albert feel warm inside, though he misunderstood her feelings. Just then Mia came running toward them. She shouted that the werewolves were heading to the Goblin village. Deeper in the woods, a chained female goblin was kicked to force her to move. A werewolf holding her leash complained that she was too slow and said they would not get anywhere because of her pace. A male goblin named Asta told the werewolves not to be rough with Rin. The werewolves glared at him. They could not believe a slave dared to speak back and they started kicking Rin again. One of them warned the others not to kill her. After that, they kept moving through the woods with the enslaved goblins leading the way. At the same time, Sally learned that Asta and Rin had been captured by werewolves. Mia confirmed it after speaking with the trees. Sally felt relieved that they were still alive, but she wondered what they could do to save them. Didarian told the group that Asta was Sally's younger brother. Albert and Risa were shocked. The elf girl said they should stay in the village while she went out to bring them back. Albert asked her to wait and questioned if she even had a plan. Risa paused and said there was no need for a plan because werewolves were no match for her. That was also what Albert believed. Even in a fair fight, he thought he would not lose to them. However, he warned that the werewolves might use the goblins as shields. Risa grew upset and asked what they should do since the werewolves might reach the village soon. Didarian suggested trying to negotiate, but Albert doubted it would work because they had nothing to trade. He knew how greedy werewolves were and they rarely gave up anything once they took it. They would only consider it if the offer was truly valuable. Reese fell into deep thought. Then Albert said he had a plan. Reese grew excited and asked what it was. Albert said it would be a hard role for the elf girl. Reese told him to leave it to her. Albert warned that it would be something unpleasant. Risa said she did not care as long as they saved Sally's brother. Albert asked if she was ready to be humiliated. Reese called him annoying and said again that she would be fine. Albert said he would remember her words and asked her not to hit him later. Reese said she understood and told him to explain the plan already. Later in the deep forest, the werewolves asked if they were already close to the village. The werewolf holding the goblin's chain said they were getting near. At that moment they noticed someone hiding in the bushes and ordered them to come out. Albert took this chance to step forward. He greeted them while holding a chain tied to Risa, who was wearing a robe. The werewolves were shocked to see a gargoyle and asked about the person in the robe. Risa flinched. Albert said she was his slave. The werewolf sniffed the air and gave a smug grin. He realized who the slave really was and grabbed her robe, pulling it off. Albert tried to stop them, but he was too late. The werewolves laughed when they saw that the slave was a woman and an elf. Risa looked ashamed. This was all part of Albert's plan. It was time for them to act. The plan was to disguise Risa as a slave and walk until the werewolves noticed them. The werewolves would want her, and Albert would suggest trading her for the goblins. That way they could save the young goblins. Getting Reese to agree was hard. Albert even begged on his knees to convince her. The werewolves called Reese lucky because they found her and promised to take care of her. Albert tried to tell them that she was his. The werewolves told him to leave. He pointed out that the elf was his slave. The werewolves asked him in anger if he wanted to die. Albert acted scared, but inside he enjoyed it. He then asked if they could at least give him the goblins because he needed slaves after he lost his wings in the last war. The werewolves talked among themselves about what to do. Albert then whispered to Risa that this could not be helped because it was to save the goblins. He asked her to endure it a little longer and pulled her forward. He announced that the elf slave was still untouched and still a virgin. He said he planned to sell her as a sex slave in Fara City, so he had not touched her yet. He told them to look at her innocent face, her full chest, and her curved body that would tempt any man. He said he barely held himself back. Reese felt deep shame. Albert said he felt jealous of her future master, who would enjoy her. The werewolves also began to imagine their own thoughts. Reese clenched her teeth in anger and frustration. Albert said he was offering such a rare elf in exchange for 2 goblins. One werewolf said they could just kill him and take her. Albert replied with confidence that he would self-destruct. He said that if they did not listen, he would use his gargoyle function and blow them all apart. The werewolves wondered if gargoyles even had that ability. Albert knew they would not understand. In the end, the werewolves decided it was a fair trade and pushed the goblins toward Albert. Albert thanked them. He left with the goblins and told them they were safe now. He told them to move away quickly, or they would be caught in danger. He said they came to save them. He then hoped that Reese would give her full strength from now on. Meanwhile, the werewolves decided who would touch their newly obtained slave. Reese laughed like a madwoman and then lost control. She said she had been patient and swore that Albert would pay later. One of the werewolves asked if she had turned crazy. Reese calmly used an ice spell and killed him. The other werewolves could not believe the captive was fighting back. Reese angrily asked what they meant by calling her a sex slave. She said she had only acted that way to save the goblins from them. She then fired more magic spells of different elements and wiped them out one by one. As one werewolf lay close to death, he asked why an elf like her was so strong. Riza corrected him and said she was not just an elf but a high elf. When Albert heard the death screams from far away, he knew Riza had gone wild and sent his prayers for the fallen werewolves. After some time, Riza met up with Albert again. Albert said everything was finally settled. Riza said it was not over yet and sent a windblade toward him. Albert bent backward and avoided the attack. Riza could not believe he had dodged it. She angrily asked why he moved. Albert angrily asked what she was trying to do. She then asked why he had spoken about her body in front of others and treated her like a sex slave. When she remembered it, her face turned blue and steam rose from her head in shame. Albert found her reaction cute and apologized. Riza's say sorry was not enough. As a man, Albert thought there was only one thing he could say. He said he would take responsibility and suggested they get married. Riza said she would be the only one who would lose from that deal. Albert felt hurt by her reply. When they returned to the village, Daedarian felt glad to see Asta and Rin safe. Sally ran over to welcome them back. She thanked Riza and Albert for saving her little brother. Albert said he barely did anything and gave all the credit to Riza. The elf girl said it was only natural to help dear friends. During dinner, Albert and Riza argued over a piece of meat, but they still agreed to split it in half. Mia felt glad when she saw how close they had become. Albert pointed out how reckless Reese was for an elf, but he still agreed that she was not a bad person. More importantly, he heard that the cooperation went well. Mia confirmed that she was able to form an alliance with the goblins. Albert felt relieved to hear this and believed the problem with the invading monsters was now solved. Just then, Riza asked what Albert planned to do next. Albert shared that he planned to leave the village and travel to Fara City since that was his original goal. After hearing his destination, Riza started thinking deeply. She felt that Albert was acting unsure even though he usually made quick decisions. As he thought about it more, Albert realized that Fara City was part of the land ruled by Riza's brother. Riza then made up her mind and decided she would go with him. She asked if that would be fine. Albert felt surprised by her sudden choice to join him, but he had no reason to refuse. Riza looked worried and asked if he did not want her to come along. Albert said he looked forward to traveling with her. Reese felt happy. Albert had now gained another travel companion. Albert then went to properly inform the others. He went to Daedarian and Baum and told them that he planned to leave the next day, since he did not want to get in the way of the village rebuilding. Daedarian said Albert was not a burden at all and that everyone was thankful to him. He asked Albert to stay a little longer. Albert replied that the village was too comfortable, and if he stayed longer he might lose his will to leave. Daedarian felt surprised but still agreed. Baum then made some sounds, and Albert asked what was wrong. Daedarian explained to him. Baum thanked Albert for saving their lives. After the enslavement magic was broken, Baum felt hopeless and thought he would die before finding water. He could not believe he had received such strong magic and was able to live on. He felt deeply thankful. Albert felt moved by his words and also felt shy. Daedarian told Albert to visit anytime and promised they would always welcome him. The next morning, Albert and Recess said goodbye to the goblins. Daedarian cried as he watched them leave. Sally and Baum also came to see them off. Albert realized that these goblins were truly kind people. He thought that if he could keep meeting people like them, then traveling on foot was not so bad after all. He continued on his journey, with Rhys walking beside him. During their first evening together, the two got into a heated argument. Albert complained about something Rhys had said earlier. Rhys said that this argument should not have happened and suggested they focus on running instead. They were being chased by a huge dragon, and arguing seemed dangerous. A few hours earlier, they had managed to walk a long distance. They were getting close to the mountain peak, and they expected to reach Forest City in 2 days. Rhys was used to traveling, so she was a big help along the way. Albert had even obtained a secret weapon, a pair of boots. He thought he would not get them until they reached the city. He felt grateful to Rhys for providing the materials, to the goblins who processed the materials into boots, and to Mia who added waterproofing to make them stronger. Since Rhys was getting hungry, she suggested having fish for lunch. Albert was shocked and asked if she really meant fish. Confused, she asked if he had never eaten fish before. Albert explained that he had lived inland and never had the chance. He said he hoped he could one day see fish swimming alive in the water. Albert thanked her for the meal and for the delicious fish. Rhys felt happy. Albert realized that traveling with someone could actually be fun, but this was not a normal trip. The two of them were a man and a woman traveling together, and he thought Rhys might be aware of him. She was not at all and acted like a careless, blunt person. He wondered if this girl was really the Demon Lord's sister. Albert then asked if she knew about the thunder dragons at the top of the mountain range. He wanted to tell her about the glow he had seen from Daidarian and said they should be able to see it from where they were, but he stopped in the middle of his sentence when he noticed her strange expression. Rhys said she knew Lazafam, one of the dragons, but she had never seen it glow. Albert asked if she really knew it. She proudly said that she did. She also added that Lazafam was not a thunder dragon but a thunder pure dragon. Albert was shocked. True dragons were part of the 7 ancient dragon tribes. Even other dragons respected pure dragons as the strongest. Not even demon lords could challenge them carelessly. Rhys suggested that they visit the dragon and say hello. Albert felt excited but also worried that they might be attacked. He knew he could handle himself if it happened. Rhys assured him that Lazafam was serious but gentle. She explained that he was deeply devoted to his water true dragon and loved his daughter. She said that he was a kind dragon and would not attack them. Albert guessed it might be safe. Rhys added that Lazafam had told her to visit any time. Albert wanted to tell her that the dragon was probably just being polite. She then said that the story about the glowing light at night was probably just a rumor someone had spread. She suggested they leave soon. Albert began to feel uneasy about the situation. Later that night, Rhys felt shocked as she looked toward the peak. Albert was also surprised. The mountain peak was glowing brightly. Rhys realized it was Lazafam because of the magical energy. She wondered why he was shining like that. Since they planned to visit him the next morning, she suggested camping for the night. However, Albert noticed that the light was getting bigger. Rhys said it was normal because they were closer to the peak, but Albert insisted the light was growing as if it was moving toward them. Rhys doubted him and turned around. She saw a huge thunder dragon standing right in front of them. Its eyes shone and it drooled. They were both shocked at how close it was. Rhys struggled to find words to greet Lazafam. She reminded him that she and her brother had visited him 300 years ago. Albert was glad she was thinking clearly again. She asked Lazafam if he remembered them and begged him not to forget. The dragon, however, just stared at them without responding. Albert stepped in to break the silence. He introduced himself and said it was an honor to meet Lazafam in person. He complimented the dragon's blinding light, but he still received no response. Looking closer, Albert noticed the dragon was trembling. He pointed it out to Rhys, saying something seemed wrong. Rhys told him to look again. Lazafam was already gathering magical power in his mouth. Albert saw how dense the power was and realized how dangerous the dragon was. He quickly pulled Rhys into his arms. The dragon then released a massive magical breath that destroyed everything in front of it. Albert was relieved he dodged it using his body enhancement magic. Still, he wondered why the dragon attacked so fiercely on their first meeting. While holding Rhys, she thanked him nervously for saving her. Albert closed his eyes and joked that they were like a prince and a princess. Rhys got off him and angrily asked who was supposed to be the prince. Suddenly, the dragon roared and shifted its stance, waving its tail from side to side. The two realized it was going to chase them. Albert complained, but Rhys said the dragon was usually kind. She added that this was not supposed to happen and suggested they run. Albert could see clearly how unstable the dragon had become. Meanwhile, in Ranu's castle, a minotaur cried as he thanked Beria. His arm, which had stopped moving after the battle, was healed by Beria's healing mage. He felt touched that she had shown mercy to someone who had once served under Ranu. He promised to be useful to her. Beria felt glad to hear that, but she wanted to ask him something. She described a gray gargoyle to him, about 2 meters tall and an old model. She said it had terrifying strength and hoped to get any information, even a small detail. The minotaur thought for a moment. Seeing his reaction, Beria assumed he did not know much, even with such a distinctive appearance. The minotaur said he could only think of a gargoyle with those traits. It was the time-telling gargoyle. Beria could not believe it was a timekeeper and asked if it might be a castle guard or a scout instead. The Minotaur explained that the gargoyle was under an enslavement spell and ordered to fly around the castle continuously. One full circle took 2 hours and they used it to mark shift changes. Beria thought that did not make sense. She assumed that this unique gargoyle had received this order because of its unusual color and ability to fly. She guessed it would not fight unless provoked. The Minotaur confirmed her assumption and added that it might have appeared outside only to announce lunchtime, not to attack her army. Beria could not believe what she heard. It seemed impossible. She angrily wondered what all her efforts to fight it had been for. The Minotaur said they were also surprised. The unique gargoyle had been circling the castle for 300 years, even when he served under Ranu, and no one had realized it was so strong. Beria assumed that Ranu had not known its true strength either. She found it strange. How could a gargoyle that only flew around the castle become so powerful? It was also an old type which should not have lived for 300 years or more. She wondered if the gargoyle had a different purpose in the past before becoming a timekeeper. Still, it did not matter now since she had taken precautions to prevent it from using its full power. Meanwhile, the same gargoyle along with a high elf was being chased by a thunder dragon, which fired thunderbolts at them. Albert felt frustrated and decided to stop running. He planned to fight the dragon, believing that they would eventually be caught if they kept fleeing. Rhys was shocked at his decision and warned him that the dragon was a true threat. Albert insisted he could handle it. Rhys called his plan impossible and warned him about another incoming magical attack. She told him to dodge. Albert felt confident he could avoid the attack by flying, but as it came closer he realized that he had lost his wings. He turned to Rhys and apologized, and she called out to him with worry. A few minutes earlier, while the two were being chased by the thunder dragon, Rhys took the chance to apologize to Albert while running. She blamed herself for suggesting that they meet the dragon. She did not expect things to turn out this way. Even if it cost her life, she wanted him to escape on his own. Albert patted her head and told her not to worry. He agreed it was her idea, but he chose to follow her by his own choice. He did not blame her at all. The real one to blame was the unstable dragon chasing behind them. Back in the present, Albert stood still as the dragon's breath attack flew toward him. In panic, Rhys created an earth wall to protect him. However, it did nothing. The breath attack broke through the wall and hit Albert directly. This made Rhys think the gargoyle was dead. However, Albert was still standing and complained about the pain. Rhys was shocked and wondered how he survived the attack. Albert explained that body enhancement was easy for him. She thought he was joking, but she noticed that his wounds were already gone. Albert looked proud and shared that his self-healing ability could fix wounds like that in an instant. Rhys could not believe what she saw. The dragon then interrupted them and began forming balls of lightning around its body. Seeing the attack made Rhys's legs weak and she dropped to the ground. This made Albert realize the dragon had not been fighting seriously until now. He decided to attack head-on. He summoned an army of water blobs and called them his sons. The dragon launched its lightning balls. Albert answered with his water blobs. Their attacks crashed into each other and exploded. The shockwave almost blew Rhys away, but she soon saw that the attacks had cancelled each other out. The dragon tried another breath attack. At that moment, Albert decided to act. He used gravity magic and cast it around the dragon. The breath attack was stopped and the dragon ended up throwing up on its own. Albert did not expect it to work so well. Rhys asked what kind of magic he used. Albert explained that it was gravity magic. The spell was called Gravity Flux, a level 4 gravity spell that changed the direction of gravity many times each second within a set area. For some reason, the dragon looked better after taking the gravity magic attack. Albert then realized what was happening. He tried to confirm if his guess was right by looking at Rhys. He saw the clear signs. The dragon was wobbling, sweating, and feeling better after throwing up. This made Rhys realize the truth as well. They could not believe that the strongest dragon among all dragons had been drunk the whole time. For now, Albert asked the shocked elf to use status healing magic to cure the dragon's drunken state. Rhys used the magic on the dragon and it immediately calmed down and fell asleep. The two still could not believe that the real problem was simply alcohol. Albert then slapped the dragon's face to wake it up. The dragon opened his eyes and asked who they were. He then apologized for what he had done. Albert was glad that the dragon remembered his actions. The dragon could not control his emotions and suddenly started crying loudly. The two wondered why he began crying all of a sudden. After the dragon calmed down, he apologized for showing them his shameful side. Albert then asked him to remove the light that was covering his body. The dragon shifted into his human form and asked if this looked better. Albert was surprised by how young and handsome he looked. The dragon said he thought his wife and daughter had returned. Albert asked what he meant by that. The dragon shared that he met his wife 400 years ago and had a daughter 200 years ago. However, they later ran away, or at least that was what Albert assumed. The dragon felt hurt by that comment. Albert then guessed that the dragon drowned himself in alcohol because of the shock. The dragon confirmed it. Albert could only see the pattern of a broken and hopeless man. While the dragon was drinking, he sensed two strong magical presences nearby. He thought his wife and daughter had returned, so he rushed over. When he realized it was not them, he attacked. He apologized for his mistake. He said he would have felt guilty toward Clive if Risa had been hurt. He also apologized to the elf. Rhys told him it was fine since no one was harmed in the end. Albert patted the dragon's back and suggested that he quit drinking alcohol. The dragon said it had been 200 years since he was left behind and he still could not forget his wife. Albert felt impressed by how much the dragon still cared for her. He wondered if the dragon's drinking habits were the reason his wife left. The dragon explained that he only started drinking after she was gone. Albert then thought it might have been because of another woman. The dragon said that idea was foolish because the woman he loved had always been his wife and would always be his wife. Albert felt sorry and asked again why she left. The dragon said he also did not understand the reason. He remembered how beautiful she was and how he watched over her closely so no strange bugs could come near her. Albert thought this kind of protectiveness was a little cute. The dragon shared that they had a child together and he became even more careful in watching over them. Rhys's face turned sour. The dragon kept talking about how he stayed alert as a father and kept guarding his family. Rhys stepped in and said she understood the part about watching over them carefully. The dragon felt proud because he believed that was his duty as a father. However, Rhys wanted to know what else he did. The dragon became nervous and said there was nothing special he did. Rhys then ordered the two men to kneel. They felt confused, but she repeated the command in a cold voice. When they knelt down, Rhys said that this was exactly the problem. The dragon insisted it was his job to protect his family. Rhys said he should have done more than just protect them. She reminded him that his wife was also an ancient dragon and strong enough to defend herself. After hearing this, Albert realized the dragon had been too controlling. Rhys angrily asked if the dragon ever helped at home or listened when his wife asked for help. The dragon looked ashamed. Albert thought Rhys had nearly died before, so he could accept her anger. Still, he wondered why he also had to kneel. For now, he simply looked up and enjoyed the bright stars above. Minutes later, Albert asked if they were done. When he saw how sad the dragon looked, he hoped the dragon would feel better. While crying, the dragon asked what he should do so he could get back together with his wife. Albert told him not to ask him and instead told him to ask Rhys. The elf also did not know what to do. Albert urged her to be honest like when she scolded him earlier. Rhys felt nervous, but she said she did not think his wife would return if he only waited. Even if she did come back, she might only run away again. The dragon became worried. He said he had worked hard for 200 years so she could come back anytime. Albert asked what he meant by working hard. The dragon said he glowed at night to show his wife that he was still in the mountains and that he could not forget her. He hoped that if she passed by, she would notice him. Rhys and Albert could not hold back their anger. They both called the dragon pathetic. Their words hurt him deeply. Albert said there was a limit to being passive and that he should take action himself. The dragon was about to cry again. Rhys then told him to find out where his wife went. Albert agreed and also suggested learning skills that could help him become a better husband. Rhys said it was good that he finally understood since there might still be a chance to fix their relationship. The dragon agreed and slowly calmed down. He fully realized that waiting alone would not help at all. He promised to try hard just as they had suggested. The two felt glad after hearing this. Albert then suggested visiting someone named Didarian in the Western Forest if he wanted to improve his life skills. The dragon promised to remember that. Rhys told him not to struggle alone when facing trouble. The dragon promised to remember that as well. After everything had settled down, the dragon invited them to his dwelling. Albert asked if that was fine. The dragon said it was built to fit human size so it would suit them. He also said there was a bath inside. The two felt excited when they heard that. When Albert mentioned taking a bath together, Rhys suddenly felt uneasy and stared at him. She had a bad feeling about it. In the end, the two travelers were invited to Lazafam's dwelling in the mountains.